and here with, whoops. My name is Jeff Thompson. I'm with NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are from Maddie Smith and myself. We're both from the Franklin County office of NAMI, and we're here to do a presentation called Ending the Silence. Before we get into the presentation, I just want to say a couple of things. One, the presentation is going to be in two parts. The formal PowerPoint presentation is the first part, and I'm not going to spend as much time as I typically would on this, just because I think a lot of the points you probably are familiar with, but it never hurts to have a refresher. But I'll go through the main PowerPoint fairly quickly, and then Maddie is going to tell you her story of her experience with mental health conditions. So that you know, neither Maddie nor myself are a mental health professional. Basically, what we are is volunteers with NAMI. The one thing Maddie and I have in common is we both have our own experiences with mental health conditions. Maddie's going to tell you her story in detail. I'll just give you a little bit of the outline for me. Basically, I started having periods of anxiety and depression when I was in middle school, which continued through high school and then on through college. Throughout this period, I never told anyone what was going on. I didn't tell my parents, not anybody. And it was because, you know, with respect to my parents, I was embarrassed. I was afraid of letting them down, telling anyone else. I was embarrassed. Didn't want anyone to look down upon me, because, you know, when I was in school, this was some time ago, there was such a stigma associated with mental health conditions. Things have gotten much better, but we still have a ways to go on the stigma associated with mental health conditions that leads to people not getting the help that they need. Oops. I apologize. I have the wrong presentation up here. Let me get out of here and get right back to you.
Okay, no problem. I was going to tell you that right now.
I got the students. Oh my goodness.
It's okay.
All right. Now we're cooking, I think.
Your screen, to anyone else, can you see it? It's black for me.
It's black for me too.
Okay, let me start over. I apologize. Share screen. Is that better?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mental health affects all aspects or many aspects of a person's life. And again, a lot of these things are topics that you're probably familiar with. I'm not going to cite a whole lot of statistics. The one thing to keep in mind is these statistics vary from point in time to source, but the main thing to keep in mind about these stats is how common mental health conditions are. Kind of what it boils down to is that in any given year, 1 in 5 Americans are going to be experiencing a mental health condition. So 20%, that's how common mental health conditions are. And I can tell you that these statistics on here, they've gotten worse, no doubt about it, due to the pandemic and the isolation that youth and people are experiencing. So these statistics are probably under reporting what's going on right now. The other statistic I wanted to mention is that of those who experience the symptoms of mental health condition, only half are going to get any form of treatment. And the biggest reason for that is the stigma, misconceptions, those types of outright discrimination, those types of things that lead to embarrassment and not seeking help. When we say mental health conditions, I think everyone's probably pretty familiar with, anxiety and depression, especially with all the commercials on TV for medications for these things. But mental health conditions, what we typically call mental illnesses, cover a wide range of things, not just anxiety and depression. We're going to talk about, with regard to mental health condition, 4 steps for early intervention in the process to enable treatment and support. The first step is knowing the warning signs of mental health conditions. These are important. Second step, for example, if it's a child in your household or family, is to reach out and respond to that child. Step 3, working with school staff and your child. And the last step, providing resources and support. The warning signs, we're going to go over some of the warning signs that you see, and there's quite a few of them. But before we talked about the warning signs, I just wanted to mention that it's important to realize that the warning signs aren't black and white. Usually it's going to be a combination of warning signs, but it also involves the judgment of the parent or household head or the adult in the child's life to judge the intensity, duration, and level of distress. For example, everyone's going to feel anxious from time to time, but does that anxiety impair daily functioning? So it's important to use one's own reasoning when looking at these warning signs. Some of the things that you may see at school and at home. And I'm not going to read off all of these. At school, can range from missing classes, missing assignments, disorganization, patterns of perfectionism, responds emotionally to grades. At home, some of these warning signs include seeming sad, difficulty sleeping, lying, highly reactive to rejection and criticism. We're showing 2 different categories of warning signs, and that's because, as you know, a child will often behave differently at school than at home. So it's important to get both of these perspectives, the school perspective and the home perspective, to see, for example, what might be going on with a student showing the warning signs of mental health conditions. And this is kind of a rough transition in the PowerPoint, and I apologize for that. But we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk briefly about suicide. A couple of caveats on this one. Not everyone with a mental health condition thinks about suicide, but there is a linkage between mental health conditions and suicide. The statistic is, I believe, and it's not up on here, but 90% of completed suicides, there is an underlying untreated, and untreated is the key, mental health condition. So there is definitely a linkage. Of the statistics, and again, these vary from source and point in time, but in the last 12 months, we can expect that students in grades 9 to 12, 17.7 or 18% say seriously considered suicide, and 8.6% actually attempted suicide. So this is, and then the second leading cause of death for individuals aged 10 to 24, suicide. So that's how big a problem it is. Talk about some of the risk factors for suicide. These things include having previously attempted suicide, traumatic life experiences. Again, this linkage with mental health, being involved in bullying in any way. Some of the common warning signs of suicide are things like talking, writing, drawing about death, talking about things like being a burden to others, having no reason to live, loss of things and interests they don't care about, irrational behavior like giving away prized possession, things of that nature. If you believe someone is considering suicide, it's imperative to take action immediately. Ask the question, are you thinking about suicide? Someone thinking about suicide, don't leave them alone. Seek help immediately. Don't keep the warning signs a secret. If you remember, we talked about the 4 steps of early intervention. Now we're moving on to the second step, which is reaching out and respond. And this involves talking with your child or friend, school staff, and healthcare professionals. And it's very important to for this school staff to be involved with the household or family to get that complete picture of behavior that we talked about earlier. Starting the conversation, I'm not going to read all these off. I'll let you kind of read some of the things, some of the suggestions for talking with the child about the mental health conditions you may be seeing.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Continuing on with the reaching out process, when in talking with school staff, 3 things amongst many are important for families to share: the concerns, establishing how you'll communicate, and talking about possible classroom adjustments that could be made to help ease some of the symptoms for the student. Talking with healthcare professionals, and again, this could range from any number of positions, from a primary care physician to for getting a referral, to a psychiatrist for medication, nurse practitioners, counselors, all types of counselors, psychologists, licensed clinical social worker, many different types of counselors. The one thing I'll just add from my own experience on the counselors, it's so important that there be, I had told you I went through all the way through college before getting any help. And when I finally did get some help, it was due to panic attacks, which I didn't know what they were at the time. But anyway, I finally got some help, and it took me a couple of doctors, two or three, at least two or three, before I found someone that I was comfortable with talking to. And that trust is so important. Working with school staff, and again, this is the final or the third step in the intervention process. And it's important to, this is a partnership, and that was the handout that your principal held up a while back. It needs to be a partnership to address both sides of the equation, school behavior and at-home behavior, between families and staff. Resilience and well-being. This involves some of the things at home that can be important. And again, some of the things are common sense, and I'm not going to read off all of them, but teaching your child how to do things like making friends, setting goals and working on them. Make sure your child maintains a routine, but still takes breaks and has unstructured time. Help them see things like the good things in life, change is part of living, how good it feels to help others. And the last step in the intervention process is connecting with resources and support. And the main one that I want to mention here is my organization. I'm going to show a couple slides, if I'm able to, in a couple of seconds here, that show some of the resources. And there's a lot of resources in Franklin County. There's resources at your school. I know that for a fact. And but if you don't know where to turn, and you want to get some treatment support, NAMI is a very good place to start. And again, I'm gonna show a slide here in just a second, which shows the phone numbers and contacts. And that pretty much ends my portion of the presentation. I want to see if I can pull up those resource slides I was telling you about. Whoops. Try.
You're doing better than I could. I don't have to share any slides.
Okay, let me try this one more time. I'm going to try share screen. Okay, can everyone see these?
It's coming up as blocked, Jeff. It's the same black screen.
Well, I apologize, but let me say this, that your students will be bringing home some packets, and those will have the resources listed. But for any kind of help, please call NAMI, and I will read off the NAMI number here. Let me see here, which I don't remember off the top of my head. It's 614-501-6264, and someone will be able to point you in the right direction. Maddie, I'm sorry for taking so long, but please tell your story, and thank you for listening to me.
Perfect. So as Jeff said, my name is Madeline Smith. I actually grew up in Pickerington, so not too far away. I attended St. Pius in Reynoldsburg, and then I went to Bishop Hartley in Livingston, or off of Livingston. I guess that's in Eastmore. But I was always a really happy kid. I actually remember I was visiting my grandparents in Pittsburgh, and I think I was like 3 years old, and I would walk up to kids twice my size on the playground, and I'd say, "Hi, what's your name?" And they'd tell me their name, and I'd say, "I'm Maddie, we're friends now, like, do you want to play?" I was just fearless. And then it wasn't until about the age of, I want to say like 4 or 5, that I developed a stutter. So I was still a really happy kid. I just didn't talk to kids my own age as much, because, like, kids can be mean, and I still really liked talking to adults. I think that put me socially behind. And I remember I would do things like, when I was a little kid, I was obsessed with The Little Mermaid. And you know how little kids watch the same movie over and over and over again. I babysat some little girls, and I now have the Frozen soundtrack memorized from top to bottom. But I love The Little Mermaid. And there's this one part of the movie where she brushes her hair with a fork. And I hated it. I knew this is such a little kid logic way of thinking about it, but I didn't like the feeling that it gave me. So I'd run away and I'd actually like hide on the opposite side of my house. And this is just the way that I like dealt with that. And I had little parts like that for every movie that I would watch. So like moving through school, I actually like, I was one of those kids who really loved school. I loved history and science. I Googled how to be an archaeologist when I was 14, and I was like, sweet, I'm going to major in anthropology in college. And I just had strategies to help me get through the day. I was never purposely disruptive. I hated getting in trouble, but I'd constantly be like shaking my leg or playing with my hair. Or even I remember this vividly in math class. I'd pay attention for the first 10 minutes. And then when we started doing practice problems, I'd be like, all right, I got it. And I'd pull out a book and start reading. But because I had like relatively good grades, my teachers just kind of let me get away with that stuff. It actually wasn't until college. So I'm at The Ohio State University at this point, and I'm in Spanish class, and I'm actually half Mexican. So I grew up around the language, and I was like, all right, like Spanish, like not going to be a big deal. Narrator voice, it was in fact a big deal. About a month in, I go to my professor. I'm going to her office hours. I'm practically in tears. And I just said, like, I don't understand why this is so hard for me. I don't understand why I'm putting twice as much time into this class as all my other classes combined. I think it was a pretty short conversation. We might have spoken for 5 minutes. And she said, you know, Maddie, I really don't want to offend you, but I think you should go to the Office of Disability Services. And so I went, and within a month, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, which I got out of the foreign language requirement at Ohio State, which was win for me. But at that time, the way they tested me is they sent me to a psychiatrist's office, and he put me through a general mental health screening. And I was also diagnosed with ADHD and generalized anxiety disorder. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I'm sure we're all very aware of the diagnosis. I won't spend a lot of time going over it, but basically it's your body just kicks into that fight or flight mode. And they've actually shown in brain scans that you spend less active time up in this part of your brain, you spend more time back here, which just makes it harder to do life in our modern society where so much of it requires you to be able to sit down and pay attention. And then anxiety. I'm sure we've all felt anxiety. I'm feeling it a little bit right now because I don't love public speaking, even if it's just to a screen. But it's those physical responses to stress, you know, the sweaty palms, the racing heart. And for me, you know, my anxiety was persistent and it was inhibiting to my day-to-day life. So I get my diagnoses, I speak to my family, and I speak to some professors I very much trusted. At this point, I was going to pursue a PhD in archaeology. And overwhelmingly, the response I got was to not talk about it. I was told by my professors that if I disclosed my mental health conditions to the universities I was planning on applying to, I wouldn't be considered a good candidate for a PhD. My dad, who was already nervous about my anthropology degree, was really afraid about my ability to get a job, not because he's mean, but because he's a 55-year-old guy. And for them and for that generation, this just wasn't something that you talked about. And I felt alone and I felt scared. But overwhelmingly, what I felt was this profound sense of guilt because I know that I have a really good life. And I know that I've had some really incredible opportunities. And at this point, I'm at Ohio State. I'm around a lot of students who I know have it so much worse than me. And so I felt like I didn't have a right to not be okay. And so I didn't do anything despite the fact that every day just being happy was getting a lot harder. I remember I used to get really overwhelmed by things. I learned this later, but a lot of my symptoms are based around control. So I remember I was at school, and if we had a dinner reservation for like 6 o'clock, if we hadn't left by 5:50, I'd like want to scream at my friends or my roommates, which is just not an appropriate response for the situation. And I knew that, and that's not my personality. I started getting panic attacks, especially around college. I made the decision to not drink, but I was around a lot of people who were, and I started getting panic attacks on a weekly basis. And I didn't know, it's crazy. Jeff said this too. I know he had this experience, but I didn't understand that what was happening to me was a panic attack. I just knew that I would be at a place and I'd feel generally uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden, the closest thing I can think of is the Roadrunner cartoons. Normally when I reference this in a classroom, most of the kids know what I'm talking about. But it's when the anvil drops in the coyote. That's what it feels like for me. It's like the anvil's on my chest and I can't breathe. It's the scariest part. And all I can think is, I need to get home. I need to get home. I need to get home. And I started walking across OSU's campus in the middle of the night because I had to get back to my house. It was a risk-taking behavior. I'm smarter than that, but like, I couldn't help myself. And then even something as silly as I used to chug a Mountain Dew before I had to study because the caffeine actually calmed me down and helped me concentrate. And I thought I just had to deal with this stuff. I thought that I just had to be stronger. And again, I felt this profound sense of guilt. And I guess I get asked this sometimes, and I get asked why I ever let it get so bad. And I think that when you're a kid, I think that one of the hardest things to realize is the way that you're experiencing the world isn't necessarily the way that everyone else around you is experiencing it. And being able to have that perspective is something that comes with time. And if I could have had someone that come into my classroom when I was young and say, hey, just because you're feeling this right now, you don't have to feel this way. That would have been life-changing for me. And so I graduated from college, and honestly, I took a big hard look in the mirror and I realized I just wanted to feel better. I realized that I'm not perfect and that that's okay. Now, even though I was just at Ohio State, it wasn't that far away. I don't think my parents had realized how bad it had gotten. And I started going to therapy. And therapy was really important for me because I learned breathing techniques. I learned really practical skills. I learned that my anxiety is based around control. I learned that what I was feeling was a panic attack. But now I still go to therapy, and I like to share this with people. Now what I'm working on therapy is proactive. And even though, out of all the students that I've talked to, 1 in 4 of them will have a mental health condition, but every single one of those students has mental health. And if they can learn the skills now to help them when life does get hard, as it inevitably does, then we're setting them up to be better people. We're setting them up to have better life skills, and we're setting them up to deal with those hardships in a more proactive way. And so now, honestly, my definition of success, it's changed. I still believe that success is about, setting long-term goals and being able to provide for your friends and family, or being able to do things that make you proud. But I also believe that success is just waking up every day with a positive attitude. I believe that success is being able to smile at the person at the coffee store and ask them how their day is going and really mean it. I consider myself successful because my brother, who had a very similar diagnosis to me, was able to get the help he needed because of my experience. And I hope that I've had a positive impact on all of you guys today as well. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. I don't know how much time you all have, but we certainly would love to be able to try and answer any questions that you might have or discuss any points you want to bring up.
First, I just want to say thank you both, Jeff and Maddie, for sharing. And Jeff for this organization and connecting with Miss Jeffries to bring it to us.
You're welcome.
Maddie, you are an amazing young lady,
Thank you.
and I'm super proud of how far you've come. And Jeff, I appreciate you sharing that it took you a long time to figure it out. Miss Hostetler is our school social worker that's on this call, and she spends a lot of time working with our students and has tons of experience in the mental health background. And so I'm so appreciative. And I did see one parent on this meeting tonight say that, Maddie, you were so much like her daughter. And I think that there are a lot of our students and parents that can benefit from this. So I appreciate that you'll be sharing with the staff and sharing with students next week. Parents, just so you know, we will have 3 different times for our students to log in and see these presentations. And I will definitely be getting you some information. So again, just thank you so much. We are all very blessed for this presentation tonight.
Thanks for
Very
having
welcome.
us. Thanks.
Our parents that are on here, any questions for them?
I do. It's Danielle. I realized I didn't sign in with my name on there. I'm the parent that wrote my daughter. It's Aaliyah. You know, we started at the beginning of the year, and we definitely have talked with Miss Hostetler, and she is that person that falls under that category of she's got the good grades.
Mhm.
But then when she's at home and I'm gonna cry. Okay. I'm an empathic person. So it's like I was crying while you were talking. Um, she falls under that category where she has the good grades. But when we are coming home and our entire hand is doodled on, and so are our notebooks, and then when we're at home and she's flipping the numbers, and I'm dyslexic as well, and I'm older, so dyslexia was also uh, um, not recognized enough, especially when you're pretty high functioning and not flipping everything. Aaliyah, she's right here playing with the dog. Um, you know, I've never done this process of everything, and Ames has been wonderful on trying to help me with her, getting her the right things that we need. But because of her grades being so good, which you don't want them to fall, and then later on down the road, like you said, get to this point where she doesn't have those things. She used to never have to ask for help. And middle school is a little harder, and especially starting 6th grade with everything, it's been really hard. We are talking to the social worker, and she is trying to get things going a little bit more, because I did talk to the school in the beginning of the year. We haven't really noticed anything crazy. And then plus she's an introvert, so that doesn't help. And then I talked to the doctors and got them to kind of push the schools along, but the school can only do so much. So what are like the next steps that I can do, I guess?
Well, whoops. I I don't know. I don't know enough about your personal situation, but I would suggest, depending on where you are with counselors and working with Miss Hostetler, I'm not sure exactly where you are, but for me, I can only speak to my own experience. Getting into counseling was huge. I did a combination of medication and counseling. And really what we talk about with the students is how treatment isn't one size fits all. It's typically a combination of things. But there's plenty of resources out there. And you know, I just hope you find the right ones. But for me, counseling, it was a combination of counseling and medication and positive coping strategies. Maddie, you talked about that. You know, some common sense things, eating healthy, working out, exercising, you know, doing things you enjoy to give the brain a break. But Ms. Hostetler is probably better suited than I am to talk about, you know, some of the next steps. And Maddie, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, so same thing as Jeff said, I can only speak to my own personal experience, and I honestly do sales now, so it's a little different. When I was getting diagnosed, I was at Ohio State, and so I got registered with the Office of Disability Services after I was diagnosed, and the different strategies I was given at school were very much outlined by that. But then personally, I also started seeing a therapist. And I think that when you're young, you do spend so much time at school, but it's also about making those habits outside of school, like Jeff said, like the eating right, like the exercising, like the figuring out what it takes for you. And I think that a lot of that is their own personal journey. But I could hear the emotion in your voice, and I'm glad that it started. And I think that identifying the problem is the first step, and I know it's only going to get better from here. So I hope that journey for you both goes smoothly moving forward.
Well put.
Yeah, we've definitely been in counseling, and that's kind of the sad thing is what started the counseling, this was in elementary school, was more suicidal thoughts. So they definitely gave her coping skills, and that's why she doodles. So she definitely knows the coping skills and everything, but I think that I guess what we're struggling with is more so finding the underlying thing with her, and maybe the counseling didn't work as much because it wasn't necessarily that. Like that did need harnessed in, but now that that's harnessed in, I think other things are coming to light and just figuring out where it's at because you know, I can't remember. I know Miss Hostetler knows the social worker's name. I just talked to her literally this week. So having this is just kind of like uh, uh, a weight lifted off my shoulders of hearing you guys. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, this is what my life is right now. You know, it's just her falling. She's not bad enough. That's where it's at. And I'm trying to nip it in the butt so then it doesn't get worse. Because, you know, we know that if we just let it go, it does get bigger.
Danielle, call me and we'll talk.
Yeah. I know we definitely need to talk. I know that you've kind of tried to have some meetings with Aaliyah, and I know that having a lot of kids and stuff at the school that you definitely help out and do so wonderful with. It's a lot. And then her not wanting to go to school is always a huge thing.
Yeah. I know this meeting is just about probably almost over, but I just wanted to ask Jeff and Maddie if this has been your experience, but in my experience with mental health, there are different times in your life where maybe you need to go back to therapy. So not everyone is in therapy all the time, but there are definitely points in your life where you kind of go back into that and kind of a tune up, or, you know, just really help that. That's been my experience with a lot of people that I've worked with. And I just wonder if either one of you could speak to that.
Yeah, so I actually just over the summer decided to go back to therapy. So I had been going specifically to deal mostly with my anxiety disorder when I first started going. And then, you know, I was going every like once a month, and I didn't go for a while, especially over COVID. But then over the summer, there's something came up in my personal life where I was like, okay, you know, like I think that I have a deep rooted fear of being bullied. That's something that I dealt with. And now as an adult, you know, I need to start dealing with this. And so I went back with that being the intention. And now it's kind of shifted to focusing on actionable items to help me deal with the ADHD. So I think that it definitely shifts, and there's times when you need it more or less, but I think that just constantly being self-reflective and not being afraid to be proactive and actively work on things instead of waiting for a big crisis to happen is great. So yeah, it comes and goes.
Oh, Jeff, you're muted.
I would definitely agree with what Maddie was saying. And I'd just add, again, just from my own personal experience, I have gone back for a tune-up from time to time, but for me, it's, and I spent a good amount of time in counseling. We never did find any kind of root cause for me personally for what caused my anxiety and depression. But what I learned through counseling were all these coping skills and the things to do. It hooked me up with some medication, which helped in that early term. But tune-ups are important, and I didn't find what was at the root cause of everything. I know it's a brain function, but just learning the skills through counseling was just a tremendous help.
Also, I had my camera off too, because I was kind of tearing up too, Maddie. You really, thank you again for sharing your story.
Maddie, will you also be joining us when we do our student presentations?
Yes, there's me and a couple of other young adult presenters, so I'll be one in rotation.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Our meeting is technically over. We typically end at 7. Miss McClooney or Miss Gibson, are you still with us? Do you want to ask any questions or anything? Okay. All right. Well, Jeff, Maddie, oh, Miss McClooney, you unmuted. Did you want to say something? No, I can't hear you. Well, as I had mentioned, I can post this video on our website. And I can also then post our student one so that there's the different links for families, staff, and students. And I thank you both very, very much for your time tonight. It has been very meaningful, and thank you for sharing your truths. All right. Well, you all have a wonderful night. Thank you so much. Bye.